There has been a whole lot going on with the utility companies in Connecticut. State regulators are investigating increased delivery charges from Eversource. And there's new legislation to keep company profits based on performance and give refunds to customers. Joining us on Face the State this morning, Marissa Gillett. She is the chairwoman of PURA, which is the state's public utilities regulatory authority. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
This is a busy time. I want to address the delivery charges. I understand that those were proposed. They were not approved, but in the process, you have put them on hold. Why?
So we received a request from the leadership of the General Assembly that we suspend the increases from going into effect until such time that we had thoroughly gotten to the bottom of why the increases were taking place. So those have been suspended indefinitely in the Eversource territory, and they never went into effect in the UI service territory.
Now, we've received some emails and comments from people who have said that they did, in fact, get those increases on their bills. Why are they getting those increases if the process has been put to a halt, at least temporarily?
It's a great question. So we put the suspension into effect and directed Eversource to make that suspension effective no later than August 7th. So it's quite possible that customers received a bill related to their July usage, in which time those higher rate delivery charges were in effect. If a customer received a bill with that higher rate still for service after August 7th, then they need to contact the utility. And if they can't receive a resolution from Eversource, they need to contact PURA for help.
Okay, it's good information for people to have. I want to focus on this new legislation. I think everyone agrees Connecticut ratepayers pay some of the highest rates in the country, and we'd like to see something done about that. This legislation does a number of things. What do you think that it does most importantly that will help reduce rates in our state?
Sure. I think one of the most important things that flew a little bit under the radar in this bill was that the legislation increases, it more than doubles the amount of time that PURA has to investigate a rate increase. Before this legislation, we were in the bottom 9% of the country in terms of the amount of time PURA was authorized to review it. And that puts ratepayers at a real serious disadvantage because the utilities can come in with their experts and consultants. And PURA has 70 people total for all the work we do. So doubling that amount of time will provide ratepayers both the additional process and PURA those resources to make a good judgment.
So the legislation gives PURA more time to review the rate increases. I understand that it kind of follows what Con Edison did. It talks about giving refunds, especially if you have extended power outages and you may get reimbursed for food and medication. Talk to me about the performance-based part of this legislation and not having guaranteed profits, which the utility companies do have.
That's a great question. So it's not just Connecticut. Across the world right now, utility regulation is primarily done through a cost of service model. This legislation transitions us to a performance-based model where the Regulatory Commission, PURA in this instance, sets metrics and standards in a transparent process with our stakeholders. And then holds the utilities to those standards. And if the utilities meet or exceed those standards, they can be eligible for incentives. If they don't, then they would be penalized, and those penalties can then be redirected into additional investments in the grid.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I also know that part of the legislation was for Connecticut to really start looking at alternatives and having that wind power, other things. And will that ultimately help reduce our rates and our dependency on nuclear power? Obviously, Millstone has to close at some point.
Sure, that's absolutely right. Right now, the deal with Millstone is for 10 years. My colleague, the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection, Katie Dykes, is tasked with a study per this legislation to look at whether the regional grid that we're part of is delivering reliable and clean power at an affordable rate. And we look forward at PURA to participating in that study. And if we find that the ISO, the regional grid operator, is not delivering what the state needs, then we're going to look at alternative ways to get what we need.
And quickly, not to put you on the spot, but do you think that this will all have a positive effect and Connecticut ratepayers will see lower electric bills?
I think that ratepayers will see greater value for what we're paying for. Value and rates are a separate conversation. There's nothing in this legislation that will inherently drive up rates, and we look forward to scrutinizing any additional requests for ratepayer funding in the future.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us on Face the State. I know you have a lot on your plate, and we'll be curious to see how this legislation pans out.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. That is all the time we have this morning on Face the State, and we thank you for sharing your Sunday morning with us, and we hope to see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.